Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your space for Black news, Black views, and Black opinions. Today is January 27th, 2022. It's your Thursday. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Nia.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, a Supreme Court justice announced their retirement. We take a look at the list of Black women likely to be nominated to fill the seat. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security issues a warning about hackers who could shut down power grids across multiple states. Then, the family of a teen found dead in his high school gymnasium speaks as police say they found no evidence of a crime.
Plus, the popular online retailer is fined millions of dollars for deleting negative review from its website, and she's giving you the best that she's got. Anita Baker celebrates her birthday, but she's giving her fans a special present.
I'm really excited about that one, Romeo. We have so much to talk about today, and we're going to do it in our voice and our truth. So if you're ready, let's get it.
Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer is joining President Biden today at the White House, formally announcing his intent to retire from the High Court after this term. Now, the president, he said he plans to make good on his promise to nominate the first Black woman ever to the Supreme Court. And now the focus, it turns to the short list of contenders who could fill the soon-to-be empty seat. The spotlight, it quickly panned to Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, you see there, a Harvard law grad who actually clerked for Justice Breyer and who all 50 Democrats plus 3 Republicans voted to confirm in her nomination to the U.S. Court of Appeals for D.C. just last year. Other names on the shortlist include Leandra Kruger, a justice on California's Supreme Court, Judge J. Michelle Childs on the federal bench in South Carolina, Wilhelmina Wright in Minnesota, and Second Court Appeals Judge Eunice Lee, as well as Candace Jackson Akawumi on the 7th Circuit. And everyone knows Sherilyn Ifill, the president and lead counsel at the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund. Now, White House press secretary, she squashed any rumors that Biden might consider nominating Vice President Harris, also a former attorney general, as he said he is going to be running in 2024 with her by his side, and the president is expected to make his announcement by the end of next month. President Biden hoping to get this done within the next several months before the midterm elections, ensuring that his pick is able to get confirmed without any pushback from Republicans who there is some concern could take back the Senate during the elections later this year.
I am just so happy. Doesn't it feel good to see so many beautiful Black women being up for grabs for this position? And so, you know, we talked yesterday about Judge Brown, and I just think that her literally, we would take us an entire show to go through all of the amazing things, all the awesome steps, all the jobs that she's had in the legal realm. She's clearly a front runner here, but this would be great for any of these Black women to get this position. They all have a great resume.
I'm thinking about Constance Baker Motley today. We talked about her earlier this week in the show. She was the first federal judge that was elected in this country back in 1966. So they are definitely standing on her shoulders. I know Congressman Clyburn today with the Washington Post, he gave a name up of Judge J. Michelle Childs, who he says he's been caucusing the White House about for the past 13 months. And if I had a choice, I would prefer Sherilyn Ifill, who is the former leader of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, because that organization was started by the first Black Supreme Court justice, which is Thurgood Marshall. Excited about that.
All great resumes. So it's a good win either way it goes. St. Louis police are looking for whomever shot up Congresswoman Cori Bush's parked car. Bush was not in the vehicle at the time of last weekend's incident that took place in the representative's home district. Police don't think Bush was targeted. Bush says she received a number of racist death threats since joining Congress last year.
New York Attorney General Letitia James is asking a federal judge to toss out a lawsuit from former President Trump. James' office says Trump is trying to stop her investigation into his company's finances. The Attorney General went on to say the former president was trying to get out of giving a deposition. Investigators want to know if the Trump organization broke laws by manipulating property values in order to get loans and favorable tax assessments. The scope of the investigation is prior to Trump becoming president.
Nina Turner is running for Congress again. The former Bernie Sanders surrogate lost a special elections to Shontel Brown last year for Ohio's 11th district. The race was to replace Marcia Fudd, who went on to become HUD's secretary.
GOP Georgia Senate candidate Herschel Walker's campaign says it's raised $5.4 million in the last quarter of 2021. The former NFL star is running for the Republican nomination to replace current Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. Walker's campaign says it raised $10 million since August. Meanwhile, Warnock raised $44 million for his reelection campaign. Now, Warnock is the state's first black U.S. senator in history.
Meanwhile, another GOP member is touting big fundraiser numbers, and we're talking about Senator Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the Senate who brought in nearly $7 million during the October-December fourth quarter of fundraising. Scott's fourth quarter fundraising was fueled by contributions from more than 75,000 unique donors. The senator's political team revealed the senator had raised a total of $37 million so far in the 2022 election cycle. Scott ended 21 with more than 21 million cash on hand. And there is some speculation, though, that he could consider running for president in 2024.
Domestic terrorists may try to shut down the U.S. power grid. Security experts say technical knowledge or insider help could cause multi-state power losses. They say these groups have been working on plans since 2020. DHS officials say Russia is a more imminent threat. They believe Russian hackers may try to disrupt websites in the United States in the next few weeks to coincide with the possible invasion of Ukraine.
Speaking of the situation in Ukraine, Russia's military buildup on the Ukrainian border, it's got Europe and the rest of the world really on pins and needles right now. The United States has been attempting to use diplomacy and its backing of NATO to head off what many see as an inevitable invasion of the neighboring Eastern European country. Terrell Jermaine Starr, he's host of the Black Diplomats podcast, also the founder of that, and he's a resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, and the HBCU grad is joining us live now from Ukraine to give us the nuts and bolts on this international crisis. Terrell, happy to have you. I want to ask you, as the Kremlin is considering this invasion, mounting this advancement of the military significantly, what's the mood like there? Are you concerned? Are people worried about their safety?
Yes, that's it. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me onto the show. In regards to people's concerns about a possible attack from the Kremlin, yes, there's a lot of anxiety here in the country. In fact, there are conversations with my journalist colleagues about if there is an attack and it reaches further into the central part of the country, where can I go? Where can I seek shelter? So there are a lot of contingency conversations amongst my friends and even amongst the general population. But generally speaking, people are very calm and going about their lives, because ultimately, what can people do? I'm looking outside of my window right now. I'm in downtown Kiev, and people are going about their lives because, again, people are used to this threat. This is not the first time that the Kremlin has threatened to attack Ukraine. There's currently an occupation in eastern Ukraine and an illegal annexation of Crimea, which is a region in southern Ukraine. So people are used to this.
Yeah, we know about the annexation in Crimea. Tell me what you remember about the war between Russia and Georgia. Russia, of course, has done this before, and it was just a little more than a decade ago that they invaded Georgia. What do you remember about the time then?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking me that question. I was a graduate student in Georgia at the time, and I was completing my language requirement in Tbilisi. And when the Russians invaded, first of all, there was a disinformation campaign that led up to the months prior to the military invasion. A lot of disinformation going on, a lot of hacking going on. And so then that ultimately culminated into a military attack. So the same attack method that the Kremlin used against Georgia in 2008, they used it in 2014, the first time with Ukraine. And those same methods are not changing right now as we're leading up to a possible invasion now. But going back to that memory, what you saw was a lot of, well, the thing about it, though, is that in the middle of the country, the Russians literally split the country in half. And so there were fears that the Russians would bomb other cities in going towards the west of Georgia, and so including railways, in which I took to go from the western part of the country towards the east of the country, towards the capital. And so I was on a train going to evacuate into neighboring Armenia, and people were really concerned that Russians would bomb the railways. That never happened. But there's a real possibility, because you don't know exactly what Putin is thinking and what he wants to do, because no limit to the aggression that he holds against Georgia and against Ukraine. And the number one thing I'll finally say is that this is a settler colonial project. A lot of people look at Ukrainians as white people and saying that Russians and Georgians are the same. That is not the case at all. And so if you don't understand the fact that this is a settler colonial project by President Vladimir Putin, then everything else about this conflict is going to confuse you.
Absolutely hard to predict what Moscow is thinking, but we know the U.S. has really spent a tremendous amount of money bolstering Ukrainian military forces, about $3 billion in military aid. Do you think that the country, if Russia was to invade, is better prepared this time around to defend itself?
That's a good question. So when you go back to the Ukrainian military, first of all, back in 2014, and I actually reported on this, the Ukrainian military only existed on paper. And so they were in no way prepared to deal with a military invasion by Russia. Now they are far more equipped, they're better trained, and the corruption that took place in the Ukrainian military has decreased exponentially. But it's more of a moral improvement in regards to the military hardware, in regards to the hard numbers. The Ukrainian military are in no way prepared to fend off a Russian military offensive, simply because Russia is the second strongest military in the world, only behind the United States. And while people are focusing on the 100,000 plus troops that are on the eastern border, the weakest part of the Ukrainian military is that of their navy, which is on the Azov and Black Seas, and where the Ukrainian navy is virtually non-existent in comparison to the Russians' Navy person. So that's something that people are not paying attention to. But that's where the weakest. Finally, I'll say that Russia can impact Ukraine's economy and threaten the country without firing a single shot. All they have to do is cut off the waterways where shipping routes are passing, where basically where shipping lanes of products and goods are transferred. And so without firing a shot, they can cripple Ukraine's economy on that alone. That's something that people need to keep in mind.
Just tell me quickly, what's it like being a black man in Eastern Europe, living in Ukraine?
Well, it depends what you're saying. So with me, I may have a master's degree in Russian. Listen, I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, the blackest city in the country. I went to a HBCU. I know, hey, listen, HU.
HU, you know.
Oh, there you go. I just had to say it. We're on the Black Show. Just had to say it. But finally, I'll say I'm an HBC grad myself. And so if you have a chip on your shoulder, yeah, of course, there's going to be a problem. But for me, I went to language school. I studied the local languages here. I studied the region. So I love it. And so now if you're asking local black people, if you're asking about immigrant black people here, that's a very different experience, because I'm a black American. I have a U.S. passport. Now, my African brothers and sisters, they have a vastly different experience. Our native brothers and sisters have a vastly different experience. For me, I love it. It's great. But obviously, if you are somebody indigenous here or an immigrant, vastly different outlook.
All right. Well, we appreciate your insight. We hope that you stay safe there in Ukraine, and we're going to check in with you very soon and try to learn as much as we can. But please stay safe there.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Remember the First Step Act? It was supposed to be an early release program for federal prisoners to help them ease back into society. It was also intended to help Black and Brown Latino offenders. But 2 years after President Trump signed the act, it seems like it's doing the opposite. A flaw in the algorithm used to determine who was best qualified to be released is over-predicting the risk that many Black, Latino, and Asian people will commit new crimes. The Department of Justice software found only 7% of Black people were classified as a minimum risk compared to 21% for whites. We talk about systemic racism all the time when we look at our criminal justice system. But I want to talk about the First Step Act. When it first passed, people were on the fence about it. And it came out that Van Jones was really behind pushing that policy. And a lot of people were upset because they didn't know. But I thought it was a good thing that he did, because sometimes you have to reach across the aisle to make things happen. And so the bill is passed. So now it's up to us and legislators to make sure that it does what it's intended to do.
You know, the problem with the app that they're using, it's called Pattern. It's like a raffle. If you look at it, literally you enter in numbers and you have to find out what your number is going to be, if you're low level or not. And so it is so unfair to use numbers in an algorithm that we talk about on Instagram and Twitter to verify if a person is low level or not. I feel like it's a cop out for the legal system to say, hey, it wasn't me, it was the algorithm, you know, and it's just completely unfair. A man accused of firing a shot that killed a 6-month-old boy in Atlanta waived his first court appearance on yesterday. 22-year-old DeQuasi Little is being charged with felony murder and aggravated assault. Grayson Gray was shot Monday while sitting in a car. Now, police don't believe the child was the target, but this does make Atlanta's second deadly shooting that involved a baby this year.
San Jose, California is making gun owners carry liability insurance. It's the first law of its kind in the country. Now, the city council passed the measure 10-1. The law also requires gun owners to pay a $25 annual fee, but gun rights groups oppose the new law. The mayor of San Jose started pushing for gun insurance after last year's mass shooting at a light rail yard. 9 people were killed during that shooting, including the gunman. If you look back to 2014 up to now, the gun sales, or shall I say murders and suicides due to gun, has went up almost every year. But let's talk about gun sales in 2020. Over 23 million guns were sold in our country in 2020. That's what they have on paper, not including the ones that are not legal, right? So if you think about that, I think this is something that should be all the way across the board. If you lose a gun, if it gets stolen, who's going to be responsible for that if something happens to someone else? Those are things that have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, you brought up gun sales rising, and African Americans were a big portion of that. Our buying power within the gun community rose, and a lot of it had to do with the COVID-19 pandemic, what was happening with the racial injustice in our country. And so as we continue to discuss gun rights and the Second Amendment right, you know, Black people definitely need to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, if you're forced to have car insurance, it's not a surprise that something this dangerous might need liability insurance. People are saying, well, the Second Amendment is a fundamental right. It's in the Bill of Rights, but the Second Amendment also says a well-regulated militia. So it's not just a free-for-all.
Right.
Yeah. Switching gears here, there will be no crime charged in the death of a Georgia teen found dead in a high school rolled up inside a gym mat back in 2013. A sheriff in Georgia believes no crime was committed and therefore no charges will be filed. Police said it appeared 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson had been reaching for a shoe left inside of a wrestling mat when he got stuck and died. His parents, though, they believe he was murdered. And when his body was exhumed for a second autopsy, doctors discovered his organs were missing and his body had been stuffed with newspaper. In a 16-page summary released Wednesday, the Lowndes County Sheriff said his department reviewed at least 17 boxes of evidence, including a video that shows Johnson walking into the gym, but they say they found no indications of a crime. Johnson's mother said she's not surprised. She doesn't trust the local authorities and will continue to press the Department of Justice to reopen its federal investigation. This case is heartbreaking. I mean, I remember when this happened, when Victor Blackwell from CNN was first reporting this, and it was just shocking to hear that they would even believe remotely that someone could accidentally end up rolled up in a wrestling mat and was just left there to die accidentally. And then to know that after the first official autopsy, his organs were removed and his body cavity was stuffed with newspaper. It smells. It doesn't smell right.
Nothing about this case has ever seemed right, Seth, you know, and I just really feel bad for the family who has had to go through so much, a Black young boy still with so much promise, so much life to live, having to go through this, and then also for the justice system to give them nothing back in return, and to close the case, knowing, like Seth, like you said, that there's clearly some more digging that needs to be done with this case. I just cannot imagine what they're going through right now.
We had Marcus Coleman, who is a community activist out of Atlanta, who is working with the family, the mother, on this case. And he talked to us about how there are so many things that don't add up. Like 2 of the students, what college they went to in another state, federal investigations that are happening in other states. So this case is still being investigated. It might be closed here, but I know Marcus Coleman and the family are not going to give up on this fight, and I definitely think we should check back in with Marcus to get his thoughts on this.
We definitely should, Neil. And as a parent, you have that intuition, you have that instinct. You just know, your gut tells you something is not right with this situation, and it's unbelievable that they're assuming there was no foul play. We definitely will be revisiting this story.